Hello and welcome to Whispers Reddit. We're thrilled to have you join our cozy corner where we dive into the most intriguing, heartwarming, and sometimes mysterious stories from Reddit. Whether you're here to unwind, get inspired, or simply enjoy a good story, you've come to the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a whisper. Grab a comfortable seat, relax, and let's embark on this storytelling journey together. Thank you for being part of our community. Let's get started. When my son revealed his hidden feelings, our once straightforward relationship became irreparably complicated. On a peaceful evening, our quiet neighborhood was illuminated by a lovely orange glow as the sun began to set behind the hills. The radio was humming softly in the background while I was preparing dinner. Eric, my son, had just returned from college and spent the weekend at home. The house had a calm, cozy vibe that comes from familiarity. Eric had grown up so quickly that he was a child who, following me around the house and asking me a lot of questions about life, he seemed to have changed from the young boy I had known to a strong, self-assured, and sometimes unintentionally distant young man as he grew older. I called him from the living room when dinner was ready, and he looked at me as we sat at the table. I noticed that it was different, intense, and caused me to halt at first, but I dismissed it as a figment of my imagination. He missed home, his classes, and his friends, but something I couldn't quite put into words was evoked in me by the way he spoke and the way his eyes stayed on mine longer than usual, as we used to do often before he left for college. We decided to watch a movie together after supper because the soft cushions and low lighting made the living area feel cozier than usual, which was perfect for a peaceful evening. I couldn't remember the last time we spent an evening together in such tranquility, and I saw how he had grown up. As the movie progressed, I noticed that I was staring at him more than I should have because he had changed from the child I had raised to a man. He also moved closer to me on the couch, just as I was beginning to feel uneasy about the things going through my mind. At first, I thought it was nothing serious, but then his hand touched mine and I felt something electricity that I knew I shouldn't feel. I was shocked by the intensity of the moment and quickly withdrew my hand. "What's wrong, Mom?" stated in a low, almost worried voice, unsure of what to say. I stared at him, my heart racing, trying to push the emotion away, hoping he wouldn't notice our tension. I only said, "I'm tired, sweetie," but I knew that something had changed at that very moment, that we couldn't ignore the blurring of the mother-son divide, and even though neither of us had crossed it, there were many unsaid ideas in the air. A movie was playing in the background as we sat in silence, neither of us paying attention. Told him that I had to go to bed early and get up, but as I was leaving, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us that night. As I lay in bed, my mind was racing, and I knew that I couldn't let this emotion worsen for the sake of both of us. I had to stay away. However, I didn't know how I felt uneasy when I woke up the next morning. I kept thinking about what had happened the night before, so I tried to convince myself that it had all been in my head. Compared to when I was his mother, I loved him deeply, but not in a way that could ever be misunderstood. I told myself that I was acting irrationally, and by the time I got downstairs, Eric was already up and drinking coffee at the kitchen table. He smiled at me as if nothing had happened, or perhaps it had just been a strange moment that only I had witnessed. I decided to ignore it for the time being, and this morning I answered, trying to sound as normal as possible while feinting a grin too. "I was thinking about going on a hike later, Mom," and he said it in a laid-back and casual manner. We hadn't done anything like that together in a long time, so after how I felt last night, I briefly wondered if I should spend more time alone with him, but I told myself that it was okay because it was just a mother and son hanging around. "It sounds nice," I said, and later that afternoon we went to a nearby path that we had visited often when he was smaller for that. The air was clear, the sky was a vivid blue, and everything appeared to be as usual as we walked side by side, talking about nothing special but our shared past experiences, his future goals, and the usual small talk. I started to laugh because I felt more at ease with him and wondered if I had overreacted the night before, but occasionally we stopped talking as we continued on the trail, leaving a lingering silence that felt heavier than it should have. At one point, Eric stopped walking and turned to face me. Arrived at a clearing with a breathtaking view of the valley below. He said, "You've always been there for me, Mom," in a quiet but earnest tone. "I don't know what I'd do without you." His tone was vulnerable, and there was something about the way he said it that surprised me and made my heart hurt. I tried to make it better by smiling. "Well, you won't have to worry about that anytime soon." I laughed. "I'm not going anywhere," but he wasn't amused. Instead, he moved closer and met my gaze, saying, "No, I mean it," went on. "Eric," I whispered in a voice barely audible above a whisper, "you know how much I love you, right?" "Of course," he said, taking another step toward her. "You know how much I love you more than you realize, my love," I said, feeling cold. I wasn't prepared for the weight and significance of the words that hung in the air. There was something in his eyes that made my pulse race again, just like the previous evening. Heartbeat accelerated. This was not the appropriate way for a mother and son to look at each other or communicate. My body felt immobile, despite my head pleading with me to step back and put some distance between us. I said, "I think we should head back," in a trembling voice. "It's getting late." But before I could move away, he reached out and gently touched my hand. Although the touch was innocuous, the way he held on, with his thumb lightly touching my skin, made me feel sick to my stomach. "I've been feeling something that I shouldn't be feeling, but I'm not sure how to describe it, and I think you felt it too." I was in a panic, my heart pounding in my chest, and I pulled my hand away and took a step back. I said to Eric, "Stop," in a shaky voice. "That's not what you mean, you're perplexed." His face was a mix of hurt and confusion as he looked at me. "Mom. I'm not confused, I am aware of my feelings." "No," I said, shaking my head. I struggled to keep my composure as tears filled my eyes, but I couldn't continue because it felt too heavy and dangerous to say out loud. Eric inhaled deeply, obscuring his features with emotion. "I know I can't help how I feel even though I know it's wrong, and I don't believe you can. This wasn't happening before things progressed further, and we crossed a line that we would never be able to go back. I had to put an end to this, and I broke my voice as I said, I'm your mother, and I also adore you but not." "I apologize," he muttered. "I had no intention of. I didn't want to cause you any discomfort." I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the tumultuous mixture of feelings churning within me, but I wasn't sure. I answered quietly, "It's okay," and suggested that we just head home. The weight of what had been said on the trail hung between us, making every moment of silence between Eric and me painfully long. My mind raced as I tried to process what had just happened, but I kept my eyes on the road. His declaration of feelings and the words that came out of his mouth astounded me. Everything I thought was true about our relationship seemed to have been completely turned upside down. When we reached the driveway, Eric whispered that he was going to his room, and he disappeared up the stairs, and I did the same. Nothing could stop him. My body trembled with the emotions I had been holding inside since the trail moment, and I collapsed onto the couch. I was unsure of how to interpret any of it. He was my baby boy, my kid, but he was no longer a boy, and it was becoming frighteningly clear that our relationship had become more complex than either of us had expected. His gaze on me and the way his palm lingered on mine told me otherwise, despite my desire to believe that his feelings were merely a fleeting phase that would pass. It was expected of mothers to care for and support their sons, but I had only ever done that. The strange tension that had developed between us now poisoned everything, and I was at a loss for how to resolve it. I tried to avoid him for the rest of the day by keeping myself busy with household chores and anything else that would divert my attention from my feelings of guilt. Over time, I felt guilty as if I had done something wrong, like maybe I had been too close to him and too loving. By the time evening came, I was emotionally spent, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. I didn't want to confront what had happened, Eric, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it was so clearly not. I had been lying in bed for hours that night when I heard a knock on my door, and my heart fell. I recognized him. "Mom, can I come in?" Eric asked in a quiet, almost hesitant tone. My mind was screaming at me to say no, to put some distance between us, but I hesitated, knowing I couldn't ignore it. Eric entered, looking just as confused and torn as I was for a minute, unsure of what to do with himself. He stood at the edge of the room, then sat down on the edge of the bed after a few seconds, but he stayed at a distance saying, "I'm sorry," in a regretful tone. What I said previously wasn't appropriate, I am not sure what. I whispered softly, "I had to confront this. Come in," despite how uncomfortable it was. Happened to me while I was trying to think of the right words. I nodded slowly, acknowledging that what had happened earlier, Eric, couldn't happen again. I also acknowledged that this was confusing and that we should be cautious because things aren't meant to be this way. "I know," he said in a whisper, his eyes sad, "but Mom, it's really difficult. I've tried to ignore it, but it keeps coming back." I was deeply affected by what he said, and I was overcome with sadness for him and for us both. I never imagined I would find myself in this situation. We were caught in a maze of emotions that neither of us could untangle. I said again, "I'm your mother," in a gentle yet firm voice. "I can only ever be that. You are aware of that, aren't you?" He nodded, even though his eyes were filled with pain as he looked at me. "I know," he said, I don't want to lose you." "You're not going to lose me, but we need to set boundaries, Eric. This is dangerous territory." There was a brief period of silence between us, but the tension from earlier in the day persisted. Things couldn't continue as they were, even though neither of us wanted to acknowledge it fully. I said gently, "Perhaps it would be best if you return to school tomorrow. I think we both need some space to clear our heads." I could see the sadness in Eric's eyes, but he nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right," he muttered. As I watched him pack his belongings the next morning, I wanted to give him a hug and reassure him that everything would be okay, but after everything that had happened, I simply couldn't bring myself to do it. The house felt more empty than it had in years. When he finally left, I sat on the couch and gave GED out the window, trying to process everything. It wasn't any easier, even though I knew that putting some distance between us was the best course of action. A mother and son's relationship should be simple and unadulterated, but ours had deteriorated into something much more complicated that neither of us could handle. I tried to return to my routine as the days went by. I hoped that the distance would be helpful and that it would give us both the time we needed to work through our emotions, but I knew deep down that things would never be the same again. We couldn't undo the change that had occurred between us, and I wasn't sure what lay ahead for us. Am I the for defending a teenage cashier after a rude customer made her cry at the register? This happened yesterday, and I'm still not sure if I overreacted. I was 35 years old, doing my weekly grocery shopping at a local supermarket. It was a busy afternoon, and there was a long line at the checkout. I was patiently waiting when I noticed that the woman in front of me, who was probably in her mid-50s, was getting more and more agitated as the teenage cashier, who couldn't have been older than 17, was scanning her items. The cashier appeared a little flustered, and I could tell she was probably new, making a few mistakes here and there but nothing. When the cashier accidentally scanned an item twice and had to call for a supervisor to void it, the older woman lost it and began berating the poor girl, saying things like, "How hard can it be to do this job? You can't even do basic tasks, you're wasting people's time." She continued to rant, and the more she yelled, the more flustered the cashier became, until she began to cry. I briefly hoped the woman would calm down, but she didn't. The poor cashier was obviously trying her hardest to keep it together, so I intervened. I told her that she didn't have the right to treat someone that way. She was just trying her hardest, and it was a mistake. If you're that unhappy, perhaps you should try working like her for a day and see how easy it is. The woman looked shocked and told me to mind my own business, to which I replied that it's my business when you're making a child cry over something as trivial as groceries. The cashier supervisor had arrived by then and intervened to resolve the matter, and the woman stormed off while still muttering and cursing. The cashier thanked me with tearful eyes, but a few people in line behind me gave me looks that suggested I was at fault. I'm now second-guessing myself, so Reddit AA for reprimanding her. My husband suddenly adopted a Burmese python, which made me anxious and afraid. Years later, our marriage broke down, and we got divorced. Originally posted on May 7, 2015, perhaps this would be more appropriate on our snakes, but this issue is more about my relationship with my husband than it is with the python itself, so I don't think so personally. 6 months ago, our corn snake died suddenly, and both my husband and I were devastated. He was a cute little boy who was still very young. My husband has owned a number of small reptiles in his lifetime, and he told me he was considering getting a milk snake this time instead of a corn or a garter. However, 2 months after our corn snake died, he returned home with a baby Burmese python, which seems to have always been his dream of owning a Burmese, but I'm also mad that he got one without telling me. On the plus side, they're legal where we live, but I had some reservations that have only gotten worse since we got it. I have GAD, and that thing makes me anxious like no other. When I was researching Burmese pythons, I kept reading about them killing pets, kids, and even their owners. Now that I'm worried and haven't slept much for 4 months, my husband's lack of experience with large snakes, and the larger the python gets, the more it shows. Since we have a cat, the other snakes we have, like our corn snake and my husband's old garter snake, are not dangerous, but now I'm always afraid the python will escape and eat her. I've started locking the cat in our bedroom at night, which keeps us awake because she meows and scratches at the door, and I'm always worried about her when she's home alone. To reiterate, this thing is enormous. He's already 6 feet long. I'm home more than my husband bought it without consulting me, so I'm not going to let it go hungry or live in its own waste out of pride. I honestly don't think we'll be able to give this snake the best quality of life, which I think is essential for all pets. He's getting too big for the tank he's in, which is his third since we've gotten him. This means I have to feed it and change its substrates frequently, which I detest doing so much, especially now that he has advanced to eating rabbits and pigs. My husband wants to build him an enclosure, but I don't think we have the space in our house for it. His food is very expensive and depletes our savings, but it's what he needs, so we can't lower the quality because the python doesn't deserve to live in a small space and eat subpar food because my husband wanted one when he was a kid. At the same time, there's a good chance it could eat us out of our house, and I don't want children while we own one. These creatures can live up to 20 years. Of a python for all of these reasons, but particularly for our cat and its quality of life, I believe we should find a new home for it, preferably in a wildlife sanctuary or something similar. I have gently discussed all of this with my husband, the mental distress it causes me, and how concerned I am for our cat, and how unsustainable the snake is. All he has done is tell me to move on, accuse me of not caring about his happiness, and claim that I am prejudiced against animals that aren't adorable and cuddly. None of this is true. Edit up the title. My husband is male. Edit 2 for the snake people. I acknowledge now that our husbandry is probably wrong, proving my point even more. I have also been informed that the snake probably wasn't a baby if it's at this size now, so take that into consideration. Even with the last accusation, I really enjoyed his smaller snakes. How can I talk to my husband about this issue in a constructive way? He already loves this snake, and I believe that's preventing him from seeing reason. Edit up the title. My husband adopted a Burmese python without my consent for a number of reasons, chief among them being that I am afraid it may kill us, that we lack sufficient experience with large reptiles, and that its conditions are too costly. I believe we should find a new home for the python. My husband is offended and believes this indicates that I detest snakes. I would like to find a new home for the python, but I need advice on how to speak with him in a way that will convince him of my viewpoint. When they were worried about the python escaping and killing the cat, future kid said, "I won't let it get out. You need to take new anxiety medication. Never mind that the corn and the garter both escaped from their tanks. Well, what are you going to do? Let it starve just because you don't like it? That's cruel. We have room for the enclosure," he says, adding, "and we'll find money to keep buying it food. I'm ridiculous to not want babies while we have a python." His rebuttal is especially convincing because they know that won't happen to one of my concerns without providing an explanation. Update May 1st 14th, 2015. First of all, I must express my gratitude for the overwhelming support I received, especially from the reptile enthusiasts who happen to be reading this sub. You guys are amazing. Now, I just want to say what everyone wants to hear at the beginning. The snake is gone, and my cat is okay. Here's what happened Thursday night while I was responding to people in my post several. I messaged my husband on Facebook Thursday night and told him about the situation. He was shocked at how bad things were, but apparently he tried to warn my husband that owning small snakes and then jumping to a burn is like thinking owning house cats makes you qualified to own a tiger. According to the advice of others, talking to my husband's friend who owns Burmese pythons is an experienced reptile keeper and could be a huge help. However, my husband didn't listen, being too busy going to reptile show. Guy breeds venomous cobras, and he's kind of a badass, so he only saw the snake once when we got it. He was upset when I told him about the overfeeding, my husband's wish to start it on live food, and the fact that it roams freely and is all by himself. He promised to come over the following Friday and give my husband a serious talk and do everything in his power to help us find a new home for it. I decided that neither my cat nor I could stay in the house like that any longer, so on Friday morning I knew that if I tried to leave while my husband was at work, he would try to persuade me to stay, so I was a little cunning and called him during his lunch break to let him know that I had left until the snake was gone. He was furious but accused me of being so petty as to allow a snake to ruin our marriage. I had nothing constructive to say to him about it, so I told him I would talk to him later. However, my husband's friend was so incensed at what he saw of the snake that when he arrived at the house, he gave my husband the tongue lashing of his life when he got home from work and told him bluntly that now that he realized how terribly inadequate we were as large snake keepers, there was no way he was going to let the snake stay at our house. The yelling had a profound effect on him. When my husband drove over to my mother's house to speak to me, he looked like a kicked puppy and broke down, telling me that he loved me, that he was sorry for the hell he'd put me through, and that it had taken an expert to truly see what was happening and that he realized that the snake could no longer live with us. I am aware that at that point, the sadness he experienced was brought on by the removal of his snake, but it is not yet fully understood, so don't worry, he is not entirely off the hook. It was calming to hear that his friend got in touch with a herpetology society that he frequently works with, and that a member of that society specializes in rehabilitating snakes that careless pet owners obtain and then mistreat on his ranch, so yesterday was. My husband and I have discussed this a lot, and he admitted that his intense desire to realize his childhood dream made him reckless and selfish. He didn't mean to be mean to me, but he just wanted the snake so badly that he would do and say anything to keep it. It still seems like he hasn't learned, which I'm not expecting this early, but it's still a little disappointing. Last night, he talked about getting a ball python and I said, I don't think we should get another snake for a long time. On Sunday, I sat him down and asked him to tell me the truth about how he got the python because it seemed increasingly unlikely that he would walk into a pet store looking for a milk snake and then just find a Burmese. He acknowledged that he had made arrangements to get one with a breeder online while he was telling me he wanted a little snake, which meant he was purposefully lying to me. The breeder is also a state. Since it's illegal to transport Burmese pythons across state lines, he met up with him to obtain it. I'm furious about this, angry about his lies, and angry that he ignored me for months. He acknowledged that he lied because he knew I would say no, which shows such immaturity that it almost disgusts me. I'm angry that he broke the law, angry that he only listened to what I told him when it came from someone else, and apparently he's been having a quarter-life crisis that he hasn't shared with me because he feels I feel sorry for him because he never went to college at the age of 26, but that doesn't justify treating me badly. I moved back home last night with Kitty, but our marriage is in serious danger right now because of my husband's dishonesty and lack of respect for me. I made a commitment to stay with him, and I don't take that lightly. We're going to be getting counseling, which I hope will help him realize that what he did was wrong rather than a hasty reaction to being in trouble. And we fortify ourselves. If not, I'll have to think about my options. P.S. The other post claimed that we were feeding the snake guinea pigs and that I was lying to make the snake look bad. I was avoiding the truth, but not in the way we were feeding it dead piglets. My husband's cousin owns a working ranch with a number of pigs, and my husband was purchasing them from him for a good price. I didn't want to mention it because I feared that people would start focusing on the snake's consumption of infants and demand its blood instead of offering me advice. I went to my mother's with my cat, and my husband's friend who keeps reptiles made him realize why the snake was gone. I'm back with my very happy and healthy cat, but this whole situation seriously damaged our marriage, and we're going to be receiving counseling. Hi, I'm back. The snake is still gone, but I suppose I'm returning out of desperation. People messaged me to ask how I was doing, but on the surface, therapy has been going well, and my husband has been doing everything correctly. I feel like the biggest saying this, but I don't think it's enough. Over the past few weeks, I've had to accept that something about how I view my husband has fundamentally changed, and finally, after many days of introspection, I realized what it was I have. He's been remorseful, open-minded, and treats me like a princess at all times. I can tell at home that he's making a conscious effort to listen to my opinions and thoughts and incorporate our therapist's suggestions into our lives. I no longer respect his intelligence, which is very important to me, and it's just gone. I don't know how it can return without him having a personality change. It killed my physical attraction to him. I usually have a high libido, and before all of this, we made love 4 to 5 times a week. Since everything went wrong, we've only had sex 3 times to be fair, while the snake was here. Still, it was more frequent than this. I don't think I can like the changes he's making because he's still his silly, forgetful self who needs me to pack his lunch and balance the checkbook. I can't respect that anymore, and I don't want to be his mom or a naggy sitcom wife. I used to love doing these things for him throughout our relationship. I've taken care of him, patched him up, and helped him work out his problems. I always looked for it as the ultimate expression of love, but now I'm just tired of it because he can tell something's still wrong and he's pissed off. The other day, I realized that I love him dearly as a friend. I've known him since I was 9 years old, but not as a husband, which devastates me. I can't believe I'm considering divorce after less than a year of marriage. I feel like such a failure. I haven't discussed these feelings in therapy yet because they crystallized only a few days ago, but concerning my lack of forgiveness and lack of sex drive lately when he's objectively doing all the right things, but his lack of understanding towards my apprehension makes my feelings even more pronounced. I've talked to my mom and friends about it, and they all advise me to wait longer to stick it out because I made vows, but I feel like I've discovered something fundamental about my husband that I wish I never had, and that nothing can be the same now. I guess I'm going to have to divorce my husband, and it's killing me. Update 3, October 14, 2024, 9 years later. Essentially, my ex-husband brought home a Burmese python after telling me he wanted a milk snake. I was really nervous and afraid of it, and he dismissed my concerns. I ended up shipping the snake to a reptile ranch, but it really damaged my trust in my ex because he was lying to me. I also realized that he looked to me as a second mother, and I detested that I truly tried to work through the feelings I expressed in the second update, but we split up after 3 months. It's completely acceptable if you criticize me for this because I judge myself after we split up for 6 months. He came to the funeral to support me after my grandma passed away, and since he had known her for a long time and loved her too, we went home together after the family lunch. We ended up having comfort sex, even though neither of us wanted children at the time. However, my IUD had slipped into my cervix before this, and I became pregnant. Despite our reservations about starting a family, we decided to reconcile and try again because I had always wanted to be a mother and didn't want to abort. We discovered fairly early on that it was actually a molar pregnancy, which means that instead of a normal fetus, I was carrying a tumor. I had the mole removed, but I was fortunate enough to be diagnosed with cancer from a molar pregnancy. Fortunately, the cancer was discovered when it was only at stage 2 and responded very well to chemotherapy. I have been cancer-free since 2016, but my ex's actions when I was very ill from the chemotherapy meant that we remained together after the pregnancy was lost. Caused me to put my foot down and want a divorce because he wouldn't or couldn't take care of the housework and I couldn't handle it anymore. I felt like I couldn't rely on him for anything, not even when I had cancer. In fact, I told him I was moving out and wanted a divorce just a week after I was told I was cancer-free. I lived with my mom for a year while our divorce was being finalized, and then I decided to get a job in a new city because I needed a fresh start. I also decided to fulfill a dream I'd been considering for a long time. I took a break and returned to school in 2017 to earn my BSN. I graduated in 2019 because I was enrolled in an accelerated program for individuals with prior degrees. I currently work as a neonatal nurse, which can be tough and exhausting, but it's incredible to watch sick and tiny babies grow, thrive, and eventually leave. I feel like I've found my calling. When I returned to school, I also met a guy in my class. We were friends for 2 years because I wasn't ready to date, but in 2019 we began dating. We got married in 2022, and my husband is the most amazing man and partner I could have ever asked for. I can completely rely on him, and he can rely on me. I don't even need to ask him to pick up his socks off the floor, and he even does most of the cooking, which I detest because I went into premature ovarian failure during my cancer treatment. We will begin IVF in the new year using eggs that I had frozen before my chemotherapy started, and we also want to adopt and/or foster eventually, so we have been looking into that as well. Even though my ex is doing much better since we got divorced, he tried suicide and was placed on a 72-hour hold at the hospital. He took their advice to see a psychiatrist seriously and was diagnosed with ADHD, which explains a lot about how he was when we were together. I'm sure my husband will be a wonderful support for me and an amazing father at the time of my divorce. I didn't have any confidence my ex would be either of those things. I don't talk to my ex because it's too agonizing for both of us, but my mom is still close to his mom and has updated me that he's taking medication that has really helped his ADHD, went to trade school, has a much better job now, and has been in a stable relationship. I wish him the best. When I look back at my old posts, all I can do is shake my head because I was putting up with so much that I would never put up with now. I also thought I was so mature because I was 24 and married, but obviously I still had. I'm sad for my ex too because he struggled for a long time and I was dismissing him as unhelpful, but even though he had a medical reason for his lack of consideration, I had to do what was best for me, and after his success, I was at my breaking point. Oh, and I still talk to my ex's friend the cobra breeder occasionally. Bucatini the Burmese python is still doing well in his new home TLDYR. Was no help when I became pregnant with cancer. We're both doing great after the divorce, and it was best for us both to split up. My fiancé's toxic best friend torments me, and my mental health suffers. Is our relationship doomed, or can we get better before the wedding? My fiancé has the biggest heart and would literally give you the shirt, pants, and hat off his body if you asked for it. He's a recovering people pleaser, and I understand that because I used to be a people pleaser. We've been together for more than 5 years. Began to pick up on his best friend's nasty remarks about me. I'm trying to be evasive, but let's just say that this friend reads who in the room would be most impacted by being picked on, and then he keeps picking on them until they can no longer stand it. Unfortunately, I have somehow become his favorite target. I tried to put up with these remarks, but they became very detailed, and the friend would fabricate lies about me saying things I never said. Claimed that he once called me in front of all of our friends, including my fiancé, to yell, "You're a bad friend," into the phone and then hang up. There are too many details to reveal because I'm trying to maintain my anonymity, but it began to negatively impact my mental health, and I ended up having a complete breakdown in which I told my fiancé how much this was hurting me. The first time I broke down over this, he said he would talk to his friend about teasing and playing with me less. I had a second breakdown over all of this a few weeks later. He admitted that his friend didn't actually apologize. Instead, he said he was sorry, and I was too sensitive to understand his humor. At that point, I told my fiancé that I wanted no contact with this person going forward, even if it meant missing out on things. He also said that he would be listening for any additional comments and would jump to my defense if it happened again. My fiancé kept asking if this meant he had to quit the project they're working on, and I told him I would never tell him he had to because I know how much it means to him, but in all honesty, the fact that this person is so evil that even if we tried to get through to him, we could never fully trust him to not treat me at least a little bit shitty. He agreed with me that all of this is being done with the intention of getting a rise out of me. He's not confrontational at all, and I always knew that, but it's not about confrontation, it's about standing in my corner, and I can't spend the rest of my life with someone who isn't in my corner. This friend is getting married to my best friend in a few months, and even though we are both expected to attend the wedding, it still hurts a lot that he wants to cut me off because I'm experiencing physical stress reactions. Truly don't know how I get a real knot in my stomach whenever his name is even mentioned. I've seen this friend once since everything came to a head, and he was so incredibly kind to me that it came off as arrogant. A few days later, I had my second breakdown because I realized that I might have to live my entire life on edge and wary of anyone who is even slightly around me, even if they aren't actively with me. I'm not sure how to accept that my fiancé was. This guy was supposed to be the best man at our wedding, so we haven't been talking much about it. I think that if he's still planning on having this friend at our wedding, I might have to call it off for my own sanity, which is terrible. I love my fiancé so much, and I love his big heart and the way he loves everything, but he loves some truly wretched people, and I think it will always hurt. I'm just hurting, and I want whatever happens to end so I can stop feeling so horrible and guilty all the time. I'm not sure if he'll set any boundaries with those people before the lack of boundaries becomes too much for me to handle. Comments. Comment 1. If your fiancé doesn't stand up for you, he's not just being a people pleaser, he's a doormat. Her best friend isn't really a friend either, and since the problematic friend is marrying her best friend, she should also be telling him to stop. I never imagined that I would actually update this account out of pure embarrassment, but I wanted to share this for those who urged me to prioritize myself. I want you all to know that my partner has really come through for me and protected me in this. We have been communicating since my last post until last week, trying to find a solution and going over how things got this bad. He took a lot of responsibility for that, and he fully understands that this is not a case of me giving in. The bottom line is that we are closer than ever because it's never been handled properly, and he played a big part in it. After much discussion, we decided that my partner should send his friend a firm but kind message explaining the behaviors, stating that they were hurting his partner and that they needed to stop. He asked to write up the first draft so that we could review it together and try to make it perfect. Reddit, please know the first. My partner's draft was exactly what I needed to read, and it immediately put us in US versus the problem mode after we had been stuck in the early stages for weeks. He explained everything in a way that we hadn't discussed, so I know it came from him. We had to control a lot of our strong feelings, and we really gave the message its best chance to handle the situation without being hostile. We knew the response would be negative no matter what, but I don't think anything could have prepared us. Scorched earth and blew up everything almost immediately. He insulted my partner, telling him that these events didn't happen the way I claim they do. He demanded that they meet alone with a media representative. He even threatened to contact my partner's parents to provide them with information, which is likely when we stopped taking his responses seriously. If that wasn't enough, he threatened to do it twice, and we had to call them to let them know that he would be visiting their home later this week and not to open the door. Still, there's a good chance he'll try it. We remained civil throughout, which I'm proud of, and we didn't degrade him or insult anyone. Nevertheless, it all went horribly wrong in the end, and we both got a huge wall of text from my now ex-best friend, who fully supported her man and gave her version of events that are so wildly different from the truth that all I can do is laugh. We've been going from crying to being dumbfounded to just laughing because of the... I am sending them a final message to set the record straight, which my partner and I decided was the best course of action aside from simply ghosting before moving on from this completely. I will make it very clear that this is done zero contact indefinitely and I will never look back. My partner and I both deserve way better friends, and we both see that so clearly now. I am so happy that I have learned my lesson. We're going to take this week in stride and grieve the friendships we once thought were forever. At the end of the week, we have a nicely timed vacation to my partner's family cottage. I think we're going to come out of this stronger because we already feel it again. Thank you to everyone who was kind before we spent $800 on a hotel for their wedding. My partner also put himself first in the end. I suppose I might update if the guy does anything else crazy, but for now, this chapter is over, and I'm eager for it to start gathering dust. Comments. Comment 1. It seems like both of your former friends were from your people's good days. It's time for a new beginning, and I'm glad you're going to get it before your wedding, so they're not in the pictures. Comment 2. Good rid to bad rubbish, wishing you both peace. I told myself I wouldn't update again, but there has been a pretty massive. I'm not sure if anyone is truly interested in this show, but it did help me type it out the first few times, so maybe I'll feel a little better if I do it again. I apologize in advance for how disgustingly long this is going to be, but a few weeks ago the sent my. At 11 a.m., send a partner a message. I'll summarize it for you. On a Monday, the most insane I've ever read said that he thought my partner was in an abusive relationship and that he should leave me for his own happiness. He claimed to have evidence to back this up, and he acknowledged that this was the main message he would have given had they first met in person. He also told him that he was concerned that sending the message would make things worse for my partner if I saw it. He said that I am someone he can never forgive and he will never want to get over this. I know you don't know me, but I'm obviously not abusing my partner, so I shouldn't even have to clarify that, but I will anyway. This guy is 100% excommunicated from our lives indefinitely, not that he wasn't at that point. He concluded by saying he hopes he'll leave me so my partner can apologize for breaking up the band. Yes, it was a band, and they can start to repair their friendship. There's a lot to process. Has done over the past year or so that made me realize he was with me, but I didn't clock at the time because, like some of you, I thought I was just being sensitive. My partner and I joined some friends, including A, to play an online game called Lethal Company. If you're familiar, I've played the game for a lot of hours and know the monsters pretty well, so I was a little taken aback when I was brutally defeated by a bracket 3 game days in a row almost immediately after entering the facility and separating from the group I mentioned. After a few more deaths, this time with me at least getting to explore a little before having my neck snapped, I asked if anyone had the Control Company mod installed, which allows the server host to play as the monsters. Suddenly, the had to go and the lobby conveniently disbanded. After a while, I thought I'd be having a lot more fun if I wasn't dying so quickly every time, and the mockingly said it must be a skill issue. I never voiced my suspicions to anyone because I knew it would be my word against his. I wasn't positive because I didn't have any concrete evidence, but when I finally brought it up to my partner a few weeks ago after that text was sent, he told me that he remembered the staying on the ship and secretly going AFK several times in the game, which fits in pretty well with my in-game deaths. I said that was being too nice the time we saw him after my partner called him about his remarks hurting me, but I don't think I explained it correctly. My partner and I were seated at a table at a local show, and the sat next to. If I had just been told that something I did hurt my friend's partner, I doubt I would have been as enamored of them as this guy was with me. Hell, if it were me, I would at least apologize to them for the other night. It felt like he was gloating that he got away with it. He kept touching my arm and asking me if I was enjoying the show several times. He would just stare at me and smile as broadly as he could. And we both felt the same way about it. I was hanging out with my friend at her place when it showed up, so we all decided to go to my place and hang out with my partner as a foursome. Just before we left, they asked if I knew our mutual friend's big secret, which I didn't, and I'm not very close to this friend either. My friend told him that they should just tell me because I wouldn't be that invested, but told her that my partner wasn't yet and that they couldn't tell me until we all arrived at my place and told him he kept. He went on about how big the secret was and insisted that I would freak out once I found out. I mentioned that we were taking different cars and that there was a chance my friend might tell me on the way. He looked her in the face and told her that he would be really upset with her if she told me before he told my partner, whom we respected, that when we arrived at my place, it was clear that my partner already knew the big secret, which was simply that our friend was dating someone. I later discovered that the had called my partner the minute. He brought me to his car and told him that neither my friend nor I knew, and that they should put on a big show of telling us both together. My partner had known for weeks, and the friend group had openly discussed it a few times, but it hadn't come up with me because, as I mentioned, I'm not very close with this friend. I got baited lol. It was really exhausting behavior, and my partner didn't know what happened until I told him about the conversation at the place. My friend didn't say anything to defend me, so I typed out exactly what happened. I dyed my hair blue, and my first outing with the new hair was with the entire group. I was really excited about it, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that they made more than 20 jokes about my hair in a single 15-minute period. This was pretty much every time he interacted with me, and he seemed to go out of his way to do it specifically so he could make jokes about my hair. If you've ever had blue hair, you can understand why this was absurd. Hair, then you've probably heard most of the jokes he was telling. I laughed along with the first few, and I can definitely handle banter because it's a big part of almost all of my friendships. However, after about 20 jokes, I finally said it was getting old and asked if he had anything nice to say. He replied with 5 more jokes, implying that I was too sensitive. There was really no off switch with the guy though, and I just wanted everyone to know that I'm not crazy. Drive me insane for at least a year, and it nearly worked. My partner and I have discussed all of this extensively, and I am aware that many people have had a lot to say about him, but please know that this was killing us both. He wanted to make things work so badly, to at least try to save their friendship of more than 20 years, but he realizes now that it was never going to happen and that neither of us should be treated the way they treated us. If he had been a good friend to my partner, perhaps things would have been. I doubt they can top that message, so this is the last update I'll give my partner and I. We're coming out of this way stronger. That has completely brainwashed my friend, and I've made peace with it so she can have him. Thank you to everyone who showed understanding. Be different and we could have tried harder to get through to him, but this is just who he is at his core. He's known for being a prick without cause and lying about it, and there's no room in either of our lives for that. We'll all be over soon after the dust settles. It sounds like he was threatened by your relationship with your fiancé and jealous of you. He likely thought you were stealing his best friend from him. Just a quick question. Did you date your fiancé before or after your ex-best friend started dating? If they started dating after you, he might have done it to punish you and keep her away from you, or to ensure he remained close to your fiancé. Did it ever occur to you that your ex-best friend was dating someone else? Was in love with him because his behavior seems like that of a jealous ex-lover. I'm not saying that your fiancé was in love with him or even did anything with him, just that his ex-best friend's feelings might have been one-sided and your fiancé was unaware of it. In any case, I hope that you two can focus on your wedding now that the toxic people are gone and that you both have a wonderful future together and a gorgeously unforgettable wedding. I'll let you know if your toxic ex-best friends do anything else, but I hope they don't OOP the I met my friend through me, and I don't think he was in love with my partner. He just loves to control everyone around him. Karen demands a new car after watching a TikTok push-present trend, which caused a major marriage conflict after 5 years of marriage. My wife is currently pregnant with our child, and she emailed me a TikTok video a few days ago of a woman discussing the concept of a push gift on a podcast. At first, I didn't know what it meant, but after I looked it up, I discovered that it's basically a thank you gift to the woman carrying your child. This idea seemed really strange to me, even though your husband's appreciation for the struggles women face during pregnancy and childbirth is highly sought after, but the materialistic aspect stopped me. The woman on TikTok kept saying that it's a body for a body, suggesting that the man should get a permanent tattoo on his lower body and give her a house and a car as special gifts. I found those expectations to be fairly reasonable, a little vindictive, and excessive for my taste, but in our case, my wife wants to have children as well, so she wasn't pressured to get pregnant, so I just responded to the TikTok with laughing emojis and continued. I assumed she had uploaded the video as satire, and I reacted to it while she was in the other room, telling me that she wanted me to use my own money to buy a car for her. She doesn't expect a tattoo or an upscale home, which almost shocked me. I looked at her and began laughing, but I knew I was wrong. My wife and I both agreed that sometimes people are stupid. I asked her if she was serious, and she became very upset and said she did want a real push present. I reminded her of the fact that she has a healthy baby and that parenting is a real thing. I'll probably send her a Mother's Day card and some jewelry she likes that is under $700, but nothing. In addition, I explained that our car, not just hers, would be hers if she really wanted an additional vehicle. She claimed it wasn't enough considering what she would have to endure, but she persisted and asked if I thought she wasn't worthy. She said she was worthy as my partner and the mother of my child, but she also needed to be reasonable and understand that neither of us is personally deserving of what she is asking for. I said that since I don't understand why she feels qualified for that, it came out incorrectly, but I didn't mean to take her personally. She is crying over the argument and isn't talking to me. I overheard her on the phone criticizing me to her sister, but I would never consider giving her a car because she is in pain right now. I feel bad, but I'm not bad for giving her a reality check. My push present was sushi, which I couldn't have any of after the baby was born. I really crave sushi during my pregnancy, not that jerk, and my spouse will give me birthstone jewelry. I'm 37 years old, and my ex-wife, who cheated and abandoned her family, shows up years later with another man's child pleading for a second chance. His watch has an engraving on it, and those TikTok videos completely destroy relationships once she doesn't make her brother-in-law a boo basket for Halloween. I don't understand why women need relationship advice from TikTok. Had first met in our mid-20s, and we were working for the same company. After 2 years of dating, we got married and 3 years later, we had 2 children, who are now 9 and 7 years old. I had told her that I wouldn't mind if she had children, so I didn't want to put her through anything she didn't want, so the second pregnancy was unexpected, and she wasn't happy about it, but she didn't kill it. Nevertheless, our relationship was still great, and we were as in love as we could have been after the first daughter. After a while, we thought that things would improve around her, but instead they got worse. My daughter and I learned to be cautious around her. She was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom, but I was handling everything after our first child since she quit her job of her own valuation and took care of all the housework and looking after our eldest. We had to hire a maid while she was pregnant because our eldest, who I worked until she became pregnant for the second time, claimed she was too tired to care for our kids at home. I agreed even though it was a little out of our means because I wasn't earning enough money at the time, especially given Angela's pregnancy, and I didn't want to bother her too much after our second daughter was born. I assumed she would return to take care of the house and kids during the day, so I declare unequivocally that I was not one of those men who ignored household chores, even though I was exhausted from working. I did everything I could to help after I got home from work, thinking she would need some time to recover after giving birth to our younger daughter. However, numerous months went by, and she showed no signs of changing. She refused to assist around the house and remained just as irate and agitated, spending the entire day sitting at home watching TV. Angela would occasionally pay our neighbor to take the kids to the park, but I didn't want to come across as antagonistic. I did feel that way because I worked day and night and she wouldn't even do the bare minimum at home. It was also getting expensive for me to hire a maid to handle all the cooking, cleaning, and other household chores, on top of all the other bills I had to pay and wanted to save money for our daughter's futures. Almost impossible. About 6 months after the birth of our younger daughter, I realized we couldn't keep things this way and that I needed to talk to Angela about it. Knowing that this would be a difficult conversation, I asked my parents to watch our girls for the day, and they agreed. On that day, I sat Angela down and told her that I understood she was tired from 2 pregnancies, but I needed her to help me and work with me. I told her that we were finding a maid, but that it was too expensive, and I needed her to keep her word and come back after. At least some of the housework so we could renegotiate and reduce the housekeeper's pay to save some money. She said she was too busy watching the kids to do any of the housework, so she rejected the proposal right away. She also suggested that I start earning more money rather than using her guilt to defend our financial situation. I tried to convince her that I was already doing my best if we were to make this marriage work, but she needed to help too. I also mentioned how, based on what I knew, she just let the kids watch. She became irate and accused me of spying on her through the maid after I casually mentioned to her that I had been watching tacky reality TV with her for hours while she ignored their needs. I realized right away that it was a big mistake to bring this up, as she claimed she was tired of me pushing her around and making her do all the work while I supposedly did nothing but sit at a desk for a few hours every day. She then went on a tirade against me, saying I should be the man of the house. She accused me of being a loser who couldn't afford to be with a woman like her because our oldest daughter was so afraid of her. I responded by calling her a lazy cow who had already failed at being a good mother. She asked her for help and blamed me for not being able to pay a maid, while I was the sensible one expecting her to help the house. Her charges were completely nonsensical, and she was just grabbing at straws to give the impression that her not doing anything all day was normal. We eventually got into a heated argument. She continued to apologize and cry the entire time, but fortunately my back was only slightly hurt. She had to move out, and I told her that I no longer trusted her around the kids because I couldn't trust her either because I didn't know when she would lose her temper again and hurt them too. That comment really spoke to her, and she pushed me hard. I stumbled, fell back on the coffee table, broke the glass and hurt myself. I had to be taken to the emergency room. While Angela was still alive, I urged our parents to take care of our daughters. Protested for a week, saying she would never allow that to happen again, but I couldn't believe her. She pleaded with me to give her another chance, and I nearly filed for divorce. At the end of the week, we agreed that she would get therapy and live with her parents for a while. I would only allow her to return to our home after she had been evaluated by a doctor, suggesting that something was obviously wrong with her because happy people don't behave that way. I decided to give our marriage another chance and not divorce her just yet because I wanted my girls to have their mother. While we were living apart, we also started marriage counseling, but it didn't work out, and she ended up cheating on me. Angela was living with her parents when my parents moved in to help with my girls. We went to weekly marriage counseling sessions, and for a while, things seemed to be getting better. Her therapist also got in touch with me and told me that she had postpartum depression, but that she was getting better. She had never had anger management issues before, but they got out of control when she pushed me for us both, which woke us up. This went on for about a year and a half, and I even allowed her to visit our girls while I was in charge. It made me happy to see her slowly reverting to her former self because at last our situation seemed to be improving and we could actually make it work. Then, without providing an explanation, she stopped attending our counseling sessions and stopped responding to me. Nevertheless, since her therapist kept me updated and I knew she was making progress, I continued to try to talk to her for weeks, but she would just ignore me and say she needed some alone time. After nearly 3 months of her avoiding me, I paid her a visit at her parents' house because her parents didn't like me and blamed me for her behavior, so I hadn't done that before. They believed I was the one who had driven their daughter crazy and caused such behavior, so Angela had advised me it would be better if I avoided seeing her while she was living with them because it would only lead to more drama, which was the last thing we wanted. She had been acting distant and skipping therapy sessions, so I ignored that rule and paid them anyway. She seemed unconcerned even when she occasionally appeared, and I just couldn't understand why she insisted that everything was fine whether I tried talking to her in person over the phone or even just texting her, but her actions made it clear that she was concealing something from me when I found out. I thought she would be at her parents' house when I got there, but she wasn't. When I asked where she was, her parents slammed the door in my face and said they couldn't tell me. I had a bad feeling about it because I could tell they were enjoying the situation, so I decided to call Angela while I was standing in front of their house. My paranoia was growing, so I tried calling her multiple times, but she didn't answer, so I decided to try to sneak around the house knowing her parents usually kept the. I opened the kitchen door and went to the backyard, but I didn't have to go that far because Angela was sitting on a swing there. The bad news was that she was making out with a man I didn't know, and I wasn't alone because that moment will always be etched in my memory as the most horrible thing that ever happened to me. The man left as soon as he saw me, and by the time Angela looked around, I had already started to head back to my car. I was in complete shock, so she caught up with me and attempted to stop me, but I couldn't hear her. I shook. I told her not to touch me when she tried to grab me, but she ignored me, so I got in my car and drove home. I told my parents I wanted them to get me a lawyer, and I blocked Angela everywhere as soon as I got there so she wouldn't have a chance to explain. When I visited Angela's parents, I told them what I had recently witnessed, and she never got in touch with me again until we had to go to the mediator the court appointed to handle our divorce settlement. By that point, I had effectively turned into a robot completely cut off. Though emotionally driven solely for the benefit of my girls, I felt nothing when I found out that Angela was exercising her parental rights. She had made the decision to be with the man, let's call him Sean, that I saw her with rather than with us. They had been friends since childhood, but they reconciled when she returned home with her parents. It seems that she had grown fond of him, and they seemed to support this, which is probably why they didn't object when she kissed him in high school. Even though she is married and has 2 children, their backyard seems to have always wanted her to end up with Sean. They were happy that Angela was finally choosing herself and her own happiness, as if she had ever been able to do anything else. As a result, the divorce process was drawn out, and even though she had been cheating on me, it took some time. My attorney and I fought hard to make sure she didn't receive anything in the divorce because I had been the one who had to pay for everything. While she watched TV at home, it was all rightfully mine. The divorce was finalized 5 years ago, and we were able to make sure she left empty-handed, but I knew I couldn't break because I had to take care of my girls, who had no one else but me. The months I spent going through the divorce were some of the hardest times of my life. I will always be grateful to my parents for supporting me when I juggle work and childcare. They are very helpful and encouraging. 5 years have passed, and although initially the divorce seemed like the worst thing that could happen to me, but I'm glad I did it today because if I hadn't decided to leave Angela, I wouldn't see myself where I am now. After all, life has treated me well in every way, and we moved into a bigger house because I make more money now and I don't have to worry about anyone else except my daughters, who live nearby. My parents only occasionally visit, but my daughters are happy as can be, and I have friends who love me. All a man needs is that. Working for me, at least until a few days ago, when the doorbell rang while the kids were at school and I was getting ready to leave for work, I noticed that Angela was outside standing with a boy who must be her son, about 3 or 4 years old. I was shocked to see her at my door, and I was still processing it when she began to cry. She came here, told me to make amends and write things down with me, and declared that she was finally ready to start a family again and give our marriage another chance. I told her earlier that this was no longer her family the day she broke off contact with Sean, that I had ceased to be her husband, that she had given up custody of her daughter, so she had no right to speak to us as her family, and that my decision to close the door and turn her away after returning after all these years eager to try our marriage again as if it were up to her to make that choice still amazes me. The divorce was merely a legal requirement. I was furious and could have cursed her too, but I restrained myself because the little girl made me think for a few minutes after I shut her out. I could hear her crying outside my door, but I decided to ignore it and went to work as soon as I was sure the coast was free. I tried really hard not to think about it because I couldn't afford to let it happen and it would only weaken my resolve. I almost forgot that Angela had even arrived at my house, but as soon as I did, I was able to. My parents called me after work to ask why I had sent her away, saying that Angela was devastated and that she had contacted them after I had closed the door on her because she was divorcing Sean and finally had a chance to make amends. My parents revealed that they were the ones who had given her my new address and encouraged her to come see me. They said that this had been going on for a while and that Angela had gotten in touch with them about a month ago. Given that my daughters deserved a mother and that Angela was, in their opinion, the best mother available, they decided she deserved another shot and sent her my address. I took offense at them, not even asking if I would be comfortable with it, because it was not their place to pardon her or decide she deserved another shot. If the children had been at home, it might have been extremely dangerous, so their actions were reckless, and they denied that they had made a mistake, and even as I corrected them, they asserted that they had an equal right to determine what was best for the girls because they had looked after the children and supported me during my divorce. They also claimed that they still occasionally look after the girls, making it seem pointless for me to try to mend things with Angela because they had influence over the situation. Their belief in that seemed absurd to me because at the end of the day, my daughters are mine, not hers, even though I value my parents and will always be grateful for what they did. They told me they had done their research and that Angela was a different woman now deserving of living with my girls. They said it was offensive to consider that they would endanger my girls or me, even when I told them she had signed her rights away because she was too arrogant to realize that my daughters needed their mother. I don't think it was their place to let Angela back into my life during the divorce. We had a brief argument, but they felt that I was being selfish by not giving her another chance. Declared that I was ruining their lives. It has been a few days, and I don't think I was selfish or out of line. I've thought a lot about this. Recently, Angela came to my house with her son about a week ago, and I've learned the truth about her relationship with her parents. I'm still trying to figure it out for myself, and I'm really upset that they all have cheated on me without hesitation. It's unbelievable that they did this. It turns out that my parents had been in contact with. In addition to telling her my new address after the divorce, I cut Angela off from my life, but they hadn't since they assumed she would visit eventually. They hardly spoke, maybe once a month, but that was enough to make me feel betrayed. After Angela was given the divorce papers, Sean made her sign away her rights and gave her a deadline. Either she would continue to communicate with her kids and fight for custody, leaving him behind, or she would leave her family and start a new life with him. According to my parents, she had a difficult choice. She decided to start a new family with Sean instead of staying with the person she already knew. Angela had called her parents shortly after I filed for divorce to explain her situation and ask for their help because she still wanted to have close contact with her kids. She claimed that she felt pressured into this position by Sean's insistence that she give up all of her children and my demand for full custody with supervised visits, meaning that her chances of getting partial custody were slim even. Her time and money would have seemed wasted if she had fought for custody and opposed Sean due to the circumstances of our divorce and her history of anger management issues. If she decided to fight, she ran the very real risk of losing custody of our girls to Sean. At that point, my parents arrived, and Angela visited them in person and basically pleaded with them to allow her to continue having contact with our girls. She asked them to act as a liaison between her and the kids, which would have helped her. My parents planned to use their visiting rights when she signed away her parental rights as their grandparents, but by letting Angela meet our girls behind my back, they essentially deceived me for years, claiming that Angela's situation spoke to them. They justified their actions by stating that they couldn't morally keep a mother away from her children, but stabbing their own son in the back didn't seem to have any bearing on their conscience at all. My girls would tell me they played games with their grandparents and their friend whenever I asked them what they had done at their grandparents' house, and I always assumed they were referring to my parents' real friends, whom I already knew, but it turns out that my parents had told my daughters to call their mother the next time I dropped the kids off at their place. Angela would be invited over and given permission to spend time with them whenever I left the kids there. Friend, may I inquire about their day? I couldn't believe my girls had been lying to me, but I've forgiven them because Angela and my parents had clearly threatened and coerced them into silence. It's only for kids. I asked my daughters if they had been meeting their mother behind my back, and when I learned the truth from my parents, they started crying and told me that they felt God would punish them if they spoke, so they were unable to speak. Angela and my dad must have really in their minds that I felt like a bad father because I never asked my girls which of their parents' friends they were seeing, and I never would have known it could have been someone deadly. However, since I'm getting a restraining order against all of them, I'm ending this right now because my parents emailed me to confess everything after our argument, and I already had written evidence. They had been so evasive and covert all along, so they thought the email would help me to understand Angela's desperate attempt to balance her relationship with Sean and be a mother to her daughters, but all it achieved was to show that they were all lying to me and that I could no longer trust anyone. They thought that by doing this, I would be able to forgive everyone. Angela had to sign away her parental rights and sneak around to meet the kids like it was illegal because Sean wanted her to avoid contact with her former family, which is ironic because they were originally meant to be her one true love. However, my parents claim that Sean no longer wants anything to do with any of them. They even had a son together, and Angela didn't want to leave because their son had just started kindergarten and she had returned to work. Their arguments had been getting more heated for a while, and 3 months ago, Sean told her he was done and left to accept the job. However, all this revelation did was make me feel as though justice had finally been served. It was intended to make me feel sorry for Angela. I've already been informed by my attorney that my daughters have filed a petition for restraining orders, and I've had a good talk with them about everything. I told them that they would never see their mother or grandparents again, and they seem fine right now, but we are still working through it in therapy because I know that this will be difficult for them going forward. This concludes immediately. Hello everyone, I sincerely appreciate all the support and attention. Wonderful blessings and messages from my girls Angela and my parents, who are scheduled to appear in court in a few days, have been issued restraining orders. I have blocked them on all platforms, so I don't know how they feel about this. I've also told friends not to contact them if they try to get in touch. I've been working from home for the past few days, and I've increased security around my home. I told the school where my girls attend that I initially wanted to keep the kids home for a few days, but as a result, their teachers are now keeping an eye on them, and only I am allowed to pick them up after school. Everything has been going well so far, but once the restraining orders are issued, I hope they will stay away. Update 3. Hello, this is a quick update. We received restraining orders that require Angela, my parents, and Sean to avoid me and my girls for the next 5 years or face serious consequences. The last time I saw them, they seemed really hostile, so I am keeping up all the security measures for a while because I don't want to take any chances. My daughters and I attend regular family counseling sessions, and I believe we will make great progress in the coming months. To be honest, we have already made a lot of progress so far. I just want my daughters to be happy, and that's all. Please keep sending us your best wishes, we truly need them.